Have you ever seen one of these? They're called magic eye posters. They appear initially as just a blob of bright color and pattern, but with the right technique, one will find a 3D image hidden beneath the surface. These were all the rage when I was younger. In the 90s, Magic Eye produced 3 compilation books, very creatively titled Magic Eye 1, 2, and 3, which all combined sat atop the New York Times bestseller list for a total of 73 weeks. We always found these at our school's book fair. I remember begging my parents for a few dollars to go to the book fair and buy a book. Now, when my parents gave me money to buy a book, I'm sure they did not envision me buying Magic Eye 3D poster books, but these were the books that I was most excited about. Many times my friends and I would buy different versions, or we'd find different posters to bring, and then we'd huddle up in the classroom at the end of the day and try to figure out what the hidden image was beneath. The secret to unlocking the hidden image is intriguing to me. It takes some practice doing something that we're often not good at. Finding the hidden image requires us to look at the picture differently. Last week, we read the opening section of the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 5, and we're actually going to stay there again. Last week was an extraordinary week. It was an emotional week. It was a polarizing week. And so I opted to just read the text and let it sit for a little bit. And now we'll revisit it and dig a little deeper. So first of all, let's return to the reading of the Beatitudes again. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Take a second and think back through your life. The highs and the lows, the good and the bad. At what points in your life would you have considered yourself to be blessed? Would it have been when you were at your wit's end? Or would it have been when you felt like you were on top of the world? Did you feel blessed when you were struggling? Did you feel blessed when you were weak? Or was it when you were strong and everything was going well? Now think about the world we live in. Who are the people that we would consider to be blessed? The powerful ones or the weak ones? The ones who have it all together or the ones who life just seems like it's a mess? Most likely it's the former, right? The people with power and influence, the people who seem like everything is going well. There's this scene in one of my favorite TV shows, Parks and Rec. The main characters live in the town of Pawnee, Indiana, and the neighboring town is Eagleton. And Eagleton is the really rich, wealthy suburb. The characters go to a town hall meeting in Eagleton, and it's held in this lavish ballroom. There are really expensive gifts in their gift bags. They have waiters and waitresses to come around and get drinks and food orders. As one of the waiters approaches, one of the Pawnee residents looks out the window and notices palm trees and says, "Are those palm trees? How do you get palm trees in Indiana?" To which the waiter replies, "Oh yes, you see, Eagleton lies on top of a hot spring, which creates a microclimate zone. We are truly blessed." And in a very real sense, I think that exchange reveals something about how we think about the word blessing. We are blessed when God gives us good things. A blessing is something we could brag about if we were so inclined. And so Jesus begins his most famous sermon with a list of those who are truly blessed. But listen to that list again. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and the persecuted. Now hold on a second, Jesus. This list doesn't really match up with my idea or my interpretation of what a blessing is. I don't really feel blessed when I'm mourning. We gather around a table full of food and we thank God for the blessing of that meal, not the blessing of hunger. Even for something like righteousness, if we hunger and thirst for it, that means we don't have it. We certainly don't view the meek, or definitely not the persecuted, as being blessed. So what is happening here? What exactly is Jesus getting at? This is where, believe it or not, Jesus and the folks at Magic Eye have the same goal in mind. You see, the slogan for Magic Eye is a new way of looking at the world. A couple of weeks ago, in our first message of this series, we talked about Jesus' purpose for telling this sermon, for speaking this sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, and about how that purpose is countercultural living. Throughout the next few chapters, we'll read about how Jesus calls us to live countercultural lives. But first, Jesus calls us to look at the world differently. He wants us to look at our relationships differently. The Beatitudes here in Matthew chapter 5 can be broken down into two main groups. The first half is dedicated to a person's relationship with God. Let's go and read that first part again. Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." We could summarize these four groups of blessed people a few different ways, but the one I like the most is this: blessed are those who realize that they need God. Have you ever had one of those rock bottom moments? One of those moments when you've exhausted all other options, and maybe you fell to your knees and you had a real honest conversation with God. Oftentimes, it's in those moments that we feel closest to God. We feel God's presence most powerfully. We feel God's comfort most completely. That's not because God is closer in those moments than he is at any other time in our lives. God is always close. But in those moments, there's nothing else standing in the way. All those other options are gone. All of our other excuses or rationalizations have been taken away, and we realize that we need God, and he is ready to be needed. This definition of blessing is the complete opposite of how we normally view these situations, even spiritually. We often consider ourselves blessed when we feel that we have something to offer to God, right? When we feel we have something to contribute. Look what I can do. But these Beatitudes teach us that it's not about my power or influence. It's about God's power and influence. And when we're poor in spirit, when we mourn, when we're meek, when we hunger and thirst for righteousness, when we realize we need God, we are blessed. So the first half is dedicated to a person's relationship with God, and the second half is dedicated to a person's relationship with each other. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. If the first half could be summarized as blessed are those who realize they need God, then the second half could be summarized as blessed are those who realize they need each other. When we realize we need each other, we're willing to put the needs of others above our own. We freely extend mercy. We are pure in heart and we value the right things. We are active peacemakers, not just peacekeepers, peacemakers. And blessed are we when we are persecuted because of it. Of all of the countercultural notions listed in the Beatitudes, it's this last one that might be the most radical. This one flies in the face of everything else that we believe in. There's a part of us that desperately wants justice in these moments where we feel persecuted. We want our persecutors held responsible. We want to gather and muster all of the power that we have and fight back. And yet, that is not the way of Christ. In those persecuted moments, Jesus says we are blessed. And spoiler alert, Jesus is going to expound upon this idea later. Blessed are you, not at your strongest, not at your most successful, not when you've got it all together. Blessed are you when you realize you need God. Blessed are we when we realize we need each other. Trying to do those magic eye pictures can be a little frustrating at first because it requires something of us. It requires something of us that we're not good at. It requires something that we're not used to. It requires us to look at these shapes and colors and patterns differently. Through the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is going to call us to countercultural living. And to start, he's going to ask us to change how we look at things, how we look at the world, to change how we look at ourselves, to change how we look at each other, to change how we look at those around us. When it comes to magic eye posters and blessings, things are not always as they seem. We must learn to look at things differently. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Go and be blessed.